figured the best way to work this, since I didn't come prepared for anything because I didn't know I'd be all by myself, is to kind of ask questions from the audience. You guys, I'm sure, have questions. And those I can answer, I will. And those I can't, I'll make stuff up. I've been doing that for all these years. It works just fine. So anybody would like to talk about before Watchmen, you know what we're doing. We're doing 7 mini-series that precede the original 12-issue book. Individual stories, sometimes a chunk of someone's life, sometimes their entire life, sometimes just critical moments that led to their involvement in the Watchmen. And we're having a good time. I think Dan DiDio put together the best possible team he could, with the possible exception of me, but I'm not going to argue. So again, anyone has any questions or anything we can talk about before Watchmen? If you like it, great. If you hate it, not so great, but I'll talk about that too. Yes?
What was the purpose in making the series? What do you hope to accomplish by making a prequel?
2 things, I think, predominantly. The question was, what do we hope to accomplish by making a prequel? First and foremost, money. We are, after all, called a comic book business. And everything that gets done is done in hopes that it will make money. 2, there is a lot of stuff that really wasn't explored by these characters in the original book. You had a story and a particular story track, let's call it, per character. And there's a lot of opportunity here to kind of find out what made these characters who they were. I don't know if, and don't think, frankly, we will do another prequel. Because for example, starts with I'm doing Ozymandias and the Curse of the Crimson Corsair. And Ozzy starts with his birth and literally carries him up to the first panel where you see him in the original Watchmen. And I don't think there's all that much more to tell after that. But that's kind of what we're doing. We're filling in the story. We go backstories. Yeah, it didn't necessarily work well with Star Wars, but you try. And that's kind of what we're hoping to accomplish. It's first and foremost, it is something that is potentially lucrative for the company, and that's a company stay in business. But second, it's something where we can get a chance to play and exercise muscles you don't necessarily get to do. I've just finished the first issue of Ozymandias, and I think it's one of the best things I've ever written. And I'm very excited about it. I'm honored, frankly, to be part of the process. So that's the best answer I've got for you. Yes, sir.
Why is it long wait? Was the movie that sparked this origin story?
No. The question was, why is it such a long wait since the original book? Well, for the last 25 years, we've asked Alan to do these stories. And Alan is Alan. The best way to define it. I've never met anyone quite like him. Thank you. He gets things in his head, and there's a lot of space in his head, apparently, for things. And once he locks them in there, he just decides this is the way things are, and that's it. He argues that he expected to get the books back when we stopped publishing them. And he's one of the very few people who's never gotten them back because we never stopped publishing. The year of the movie, they sold over 1 million copies still. And he makes a great deal of money, and he complains about how he's being cheated. I've never figured that out. I would happily trade with him anytime. I'm sorry?
He's British.
So he's really unsupportive?
Oh, he's very unsupportive. He thinks somehow he was cheated. None of us have been able to figure this out. But the reason it's taken until now to do it is because Paul Levitz, who's a gentleman and a scholar and a terrific human being, didn't want to start a war, didn't want Alan up in arms, feeling we were somehow cheating him again. And so as long as he was running the company, he just said, let's leave it alone. But when Jim and Dan took over, their job is to make money, and they're going, we have an incredibly lucrative property here that can be well done by the right people, and we're not doing it because Alan is unhappy. Alan is always unhappy. And so they decided to go ahead with the new project. It wasn't like as if he had not been offered this opportunity himself for 25 years. We would like you to do this. I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. So that's why.
Got a question?
Please.
How long have you known Alan Moore? Have you worked with him personally, or have you just
I had been reading Alan's work on like Warrior in 2000 AD when he was doing his work in England. And when I needed a new writer for Swamp Thing, which I was editing at the time, I called Alan. I got his phone number from Dave Gibbons, and I called him up. And I introduced myself and said, "Hi, I'm Len Wein, and I'm the editor of Swamp Thing, and I would like you to write the book." And he went, "Who is this really?" And I said, No, really, it's Len Wein. He said, "No, come on, which one of my mates is having me on?" No, it really, oh, the hell with it. And he hung up on me. So I had to call him back and spend 20 minutes convincing him I was me. And he finally agreed to do the book. So, I mean, I went over to England a number of times during the heyday of the British writer and artist when we were hiring a lot of folks. And Alan was late to the party. We threw a cocktail party, Jeanette Kahn and I, and Alan was an hour and a half, 2 hours late. He came in wearing a suit that had the arms ended about there and the cuffs appropriately about the same height, wearing one of those piano ties, the piano keyboard ties, a top hat, old-fashioned boots, a ruffled shirt, and apologized for being late. And he said, "Well, I'm sorry I'm late, but I stopped a couple of hours ago with the optometrist, and he checked my eyes and discovered that I have 20/20 vision in one eye and 22,000 vision in the other. And so basically why I'm late is because we spent this last 2.5 hours discussing whether or not it would be easier and simpler for me to simply get a monocle for the bad eye. But after the 2.5 hours, I finally decided it might make me look a little odd. So he had decided not to. That's my first meeting with Alan. It hasn't changed much in the last 25, 30 years. Any other questions, please, or it's going to be the shortest and or longest panel ever. I'm sorry?
I got a follow-up to that.
Please.
So, have you talked to Alan more personally since you guys have started the book?
No, he won't talk to any of us.
So he's angry at you personally, or not?
He's mad at all of us. He sits at the top of his tower like Surinman and throws things at vegetables at people as they go by. It's Alan. Yeah. And, forget it, Jake. It's Allentown. It's really kind of... Yes, sir.
Of the two before Watchmen books that you're doing, were they books that you personally chose, or were they something that was assigned to you?
Yes and no. The answer to is of the two books I'm doing, did I pick them myself or were they assigned to me? I was asked by Dan to do Ozymandias, which is the spine, really, of the miniseries, since everything that happens really all happens because of him. But when Dan suggested I do another Tale of the Black Freighter, my attitude was, no, you guys, the whole premise was that DC stopped doing superhero books in the 60s because there were real superheroes now, and they started doing a line of pirate comics. Let me do one of the other pirate comics. So I came up with The Curse of the Crimson Corsair, and we're doing that instead as a second book. I also have done a house ad. I designed a house ad that I think will appear in Watchmen Epilogue. We're doing a blast issue to tie everything up. And I did a 2-page spread ad for the entire line of pirate comics. I came up with a whole damn line of pirate comics. And we'll see how they all come out looking. Yes, back there. Did you just raise your hand? Well, do it. Raise your hand and answer the question.
Yeah, I heard there was an after Watchmen. Were you part of that? Was there an after Watchmen?
No, there's a before Watchmen. By after Watchmen, it would be a lot of issues of scraping up Rorschach's ashes. I think they really wouldn't be terribly exciting books. But this is the before Watchmen series. That gentleman over there has got the first book out, in fact, Minutemen. But the astonishing Darwin Cook, who just is always amazing. Yes?
If you did an after Watchmen that was like dystopian because Ozymandias did not successfully take over the world.
I'm sorry.
What if you did an after Watchmen that was dystopian or like had something to do with Ozymandias like actually successfully or not successfully taking over the world?
Well, his goal isn't to take over the world. His goal was to save the world. Well, he has his own way about it. I mean, I got to tell you, I've plotted the first 4 of the 6 issues of Ozzy, and I'm on the 5th one now, and he's fascinating. He is really an interesting character. How his mind works is very scary place to play. And again, I don't think we're going to do anything after these, but I've been wrong before. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I suppose it depends on how well they sell, how well they're received. So far, so good. All the reviews I've read on Minutemen #1 have been overwhelmingly positive. Yes, sir.
So when you were approached by Dan Didio to do the Ozymandias and the pirate book, was it a hard decision? I mean, Watchmen's such an iconic story. Even people who don't read comics pretty much recognize it. It has a spot on Time Magazine's greatest novel since the 1920s. So was it a difficult decision, and what made you certain that you would want to work on for Watchmen?
Good question. Absolutely not, in terms of being afraid of doing it. I may be one of the very few writers in the business who's not afraid of Alan, in terms of his ability. I mean, I was his editor. I'm the guy who brought him over. I was also responsible for nixing a number of stories when he was doing Swamp Thing, going, I'm sorry, that's a great story. It doesn't work here. I don't want you to do it. They all got done later. When I left and the new editor came over, no one else was willing to tell Alan no. But I've never been intimidated by him. I think he's one of the best wordsmiths in the history of the industry. But he's not necessarily one of the best plotters. I mean, one of the things I discovered as we were doing Swamp Thing was if you reduce each story to its most basic elements, it's the exact same plot over and over. And so I've never been intimidated by Alan. Ozzy's a little intimidating as a character to approach and come at, but overall it was never a hard choice for me to make. I mean, he's followed me on other things. Might as well follow him on something. Yes, sir.
What do you think about Scott Snyder on the Swamp Thing?
He's doing a lovely job. I actually like what Scott's doing. We're talking about maybe doing the annual together next year, which would be fun. It'd be nice to be back doing Swamp Thing again. But I very much like what he's doing. I think he's doing a classy job, and he's got the tone right.
Yes.
So the character's working. Yes, ma'am.
Was Ozzy always your favorite character from the original Watchmen?
Actually, I think Night Owl was my favorite character. I'm overage lub. I seem sympathetic to him somehow. Ozzy is fascinating as a writer and picking a tone. He's all about himself. He's a very patient man. One of the things you learn immediately is he's patient. If he has a problem, he will take as long as it takes for him to solve it. That may take decades, but he will solve it in his own way. I did not realize I would enjoy writing him as much as I do. And Jay Lee is doing the art, and Jay's art is... Everybody else is jealous. I mean, everybody. I'm not doing this patting myself on the back because I didn't pick Jay. In fact, I was just terrified he'd never finish the second issue, and I'm still terrified he'll never finish. He just finished issue 1 today. Book comes out in 3 weeks. He got the plot in December. So, but the work is spectacular, just spectacular. And he promises he'll make the rest of the deadlines. And so we've all bought guns, and we're going to stand at his house until he finishes the work. But no, I mean, I think it's an amazing mix of people involved in this project. I love Darwin. Darwin Cook is perfect for the Minutemen. Where do you see Silk Spectre next week? Amanda Connor doing the best work of her career. Wonderful stuff. Covers. Hello. Everybody. I mean, the Kuberts. I had the pleasure and honor of working with Joe and his son on 2 issues of Legacies, and they are amazing, and they're punctual. And Night Owl is breathtaking. They're doing a great job. Adam Hughes, for the first time in I don't know how many years, doing interior work, which is great on Dr. Manhattan. Everybody. Oh, and Lee Bermejo's work on the comedian, on Rorschach. The splash page is simply a shot of New York City in the rain. And when he turned it in and I looked at it, I started to cry. It's that good. It was just like, oh my God. Everybody working on this project is busting their chops to try to be as good as what they believe everybody else working on the project is doing. So, yay. Well, we all win, I think, in a case like that, when everybody's busting their chops to produce something of immeasurable work. There are no losers, except Alan, if you ask him. Questions? Yes?
So how do you pick what characters you feel you could write well? Does it have to have like some sort of resonance with your own parts of your personality, or do you just empathize with them, or how do you write different personality types?
Wow, good question. When people ask me how to learn how to write, what I tell them the first thing they need to do is learn how to listen. In my early days as a writer, I would simply spend the day on the subway or the bus when I lived in New York and listen to the people around me. Hear how people communicate, hear how people speak, all the little odd idiosyncrasies that are part of the speech pattern of the human voice. It's hard. I mean, I like to think of myself as very flexible. There was a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 years ago, where in the space of 2 weeks, I wrote an issue of The Simpsons, I wrote a science fiction story, a cowboy story for an anthology, and a superhero story, all within the same 2 weeks. And I had to change the voice every time, obviously, because you really don't want Batman sounding like Homer Simpson. Although, no, it's fun. But part of it is learning how to put yourself in the other people's shoes as best you can. Think of them. I mean, Ozzy is not my favorite speech pattern to write, but he has this particular way of speaking and a particular attitude towards how he views the world. And you have to sort of sit down, figure that one out, and come at it that way. And it's true with every book. Every book has its own voice, or should have its own voice. And what you've got to do is listen to the voice that has been there in the past, if it's a book that you're picking up from someone else, and try your best to emulate that. There is no secret. It's just hard work. Sorry. On the other hand, I have these green pills here that if you eat. Questions? I'm sorry, someone. Oh, you guys are in the dark. Sorry.
You said if sales were good, there might be more to the franchise. Before Watchmen, where do you think the franchise can even go?
I think we'll just do nothing but Midnight Lady books. I don't know, seriously, I haven't a clue. The difference, of course, between this and the original Watchmen is because it precedes the series, they were all alive at the end still. I mean, it's really hard to do a lot of what you do with Watchmen since so many of them are dead. I think we're going to take this a step at a time because I don't think we want to just wring all of the juice there is out of the franchise. But this is certainly worth the doing, this one series. And if we can figure out another story worth the doing or another way to approach these characters worth the doing, we may. But I certainly, my expectation is this is it. We'll do these and then we're done. But I've been wrong before. Yes, sir.
Do you think it's oversaturating? You guys are doing these all like in 6 weeks or 2 months, whatever it is. You're looking to spread out a little more?
It's spread out. No, it wasn't. But it is spread out over 35 weeks. We're not oversaturating. It's only one Watchmen book a week. And they come out as they need to come out. And by that I mean as they fit the overall story. There's, I think, 5 weeks between Ozymandias 1 and Ozymandias 2, then 7 weeks between 2 and 3, and then 7 weeks between 3 and 4, and then 5 weeks again between 5 and 6. They come out as they sort of need to fit the overall story we're telling. So I don't think it's oversaturation. One book a week isn't oversaturation. Yes. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that when Jim Lee came on at DC, that's kind of when this all started.
Well, Dan and Jim, they split
Dan and Jim. How long have you been involved? When did you first hear about it? How long has it been going?
About a year. I'm trying to remember if I heard from him first at last Comic-Con or last New York Con. But certainly by one of those two, we started talking about doing this. And originally he actually had me slotted for a couple of different things. And then as it evolved, he said, well, you're the problem solver. You solve all the problems. Here, go. And so I started figuring out how Adrian Veidt's mind works. It's a scary place to live.
Yeah.
Sir?
Have you ever, throughout your time, written something that, an opus or a favorite work or something so good you can't believe that you even wrote it when you look back at it?
Some of the early Swamp Thing stuff is stuff I don't believe I actually did. Legacies last year, the history of the DCU, I really am as proud of as anything I've ever done. It's, as I start going through the history of the company, I start realizing, well, now that there aren't 158,000 Earths and there's only one, I have to retell some of these stories. The whole meeting of the first two Flashes had to be a different story entirely because they didn't meet on different worlds. So, yes, there are some things I've done I'm lucky. Some of the issues of the Hulk I wrote, some Batman. And there are things I wrote that I didn't really write. Just because my name's on them doesn't mean I wrote them. I used to say when I'm doing 12 monthly books a year, if I can do 4 great issues and 4 good issues and 4 issues that you can read, it's a pretty fair average. More questions? Yes, sir.
Had you the opportunity to choose one more book to write for before Watchmen, excluding the ones you're already working on, which would you pick?
Night Owl. I think I would like to write Night Owl. Just, it's Batman sort of, and I love Batman. Every time I get a chance to do a new Batman story, I sort of leap at it. So. Who would I not want to do? Probably Dr. Manhattan. I don't understand physics. I barely understand arithmetic. But you will discover that Joe Straczynski does. And I read the first issue and I called him up and I said, okay, now what? And he said, wait till next month. He's done things that you have to understand science to do what he's done. It's astonishing. And, Adam Hughes, not chopped liver. The art's spectacular, too. Yes? Oh, no. She's got one. She wins. I know, I can see her. She's in the light. Okay.
All right. How do you feel about the conceptual or philosophical content of this series? How do you think it will contribute to the overall, Watchmen icon?
Wow. I don't know if you heard me. Actually, apparently there's a mic up there for people who want to ask questions. How do I feel about how... Try that again?
Well, I was wondering if it's more like a soulful question. How do you feel that this conceptual content of this new series is going to contribute to the icon that is Watchmen?
Well, I think you're going to find out a lot more about these characters, the backstory of these people. Some stories are very similar, weirdly enough. Some are radically different. But I think you get to discover who they are more as human beings than you did in the original book, even though you did a considerable amount of that. There are lots of... my first issue, Ozymandias doesn't put the costume on until the last page. And for the first time. You get to figure out a lot of his life and why he is who he is and the way he is now. And that's true of many of the characters. There's a lot of the backstory. And I think that helps embellish the characters, which in turn embellishes the story. Wow, that was a good answer. I got to write that down. You had a question?
Yeah. You mentioned that each book is going to come out one a week.
Yes.
And the order in which they come out is going to fit the overall tapestry in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So how much have you had to collaborate with the other guys that are writing it to make sure it fits like that?
We had a meeting last fall in New York. We sat down, we set aside 3 days to sit down and go over the project and figure out what we each wanted to do and how we would each approach it and how they would intersect. And we figured if we're lucky, we'll get this done in 3 days. And we sat down to a breakfast in our hotel room. We were locked away at a hotel several blocks from the offices. And, had a bagel and coffee and sat down and started chatting. And then we broke for lunch at 2. And when we decided, okay, so when should we be back? We suddenly realized we didn't need to. We had resolved it all in that one morning, which tells you how involved everybody was. So we got to hang around for a couple of days and eat. It was good. But no, we all sat in and we all piped in where we were needed and where we weren't. Well, if you're doing this here, what about that? Don't forget, I mean, we really tried to make sure we filled in all of the little holes and openings that might be left behind. And as we've gone along, it's been the same. We sort of keep peeking in on each other. If you don't ask me questions, I'm going to make faces. Yes, sir.
It was very clear how Alan Moore felt about the Watchmen movie. The Harump is still rumbling. What do you feel about the movie?
I think you couldn't win with that film. The closer you stayed to the film, the more trouble you were in. The further you stayed away from the original book, the more trouble you were in. I think the change from the big stupid squid, not that I have an opinion, to the machinery at the end was a plus. And I love the little touch that if you notice quickly when the machine disappears, it says squid. It stands for, I don't remember, sonic, quantum, whatever, and it just reads squid. I always loved the first 11 issues of that book and hated the last. And actually one of the things I'm doing in one of my issues is resolving my problem without affecting what Alan did at all. Because that would be wrong. I don't think any of us in anything we've done has basically denied anything Alan did in the course of the original 12 issues. Getting your way around it sometimes, not easy, but we didn't deny it. So, I thought Zack Snyder was the bravest man in Hollywood when he took on that project, because no one was going to like it one way or another. It's too close. It looks stupid. It's too far. You cheat. You should have done the original. You can't win. It was a no-win scenario, and somebody had to do it, and he volunteered, and I give him credit for that. And that Purple Heart too, I think. Yes.
Do you think that they can make a movie out of the before Watchmen, or do you think no one's going to try to touch that?
Wow. Can they make a movie out of what I've seen of some of the books? Yes. Will they make a movie? The original film didn't do as well as they'd liked. And Hollywood's all about how much did it make on Monday. So probably not. But again, I've been wrong before. Yes?
So for those who don't know, I know you obviously do, but all the Watchmen characters are based off the original Charlton characters.
Charlton.
Yeah, but like Blue Beetle,
Yeah.
The Question. And when I heard before Watchmen, I thought it was kind of funny. I was thinking, oh, are they bringing those characters back? But, I mean, with the before Watchmen coming out, is there any possible renewed interest in the original Vic Sage Question and Ted Kord?
Oh, probably. There's no reason not to, since they've rebooted the whole universe. Is there anyone here who doesn't know that the Watchmen were originally the Charlton characters from the old Charlton comics? Good, we're good. Basically, Dick Giordano, who had edited and been involved in the development of a number of those characters, had come to DC not long before and wanted to bring back those characters. He bought the rights, DC bought the rights from Charlton. And when Alan came along and we saw what Alan could do, Dick said, would you like to take a shot at playing with the Charlton characters? And Alan said, I'd love to. And so he turned in the original plot for the Watchmen, and Dick kind of called him and said, this is terrific, I love this. But I just paid a whole lot of money for these characters. I'd really rather not have half of them dead by the end of the first story. And Alan said, oh, yeah, that's the point, I suppose. So Dick said, why don't you take your original story and do new characters who are those characters, so you don't have to change the story much, but at least then you can do what you want with them. If they die at the end, they die at the end. And so that's exactly what happened. Most of the Charlton characters, not all, but many of them moved on to DC. And, The Question had a long-running book. Blue Beetle I wrote myself for a couple of years. It was a lot of fun. And The Watchmen created its own path. So now that DC is rebooting, and their goal is 52 books a month, the new 52, it is probable, I don't know, but I'm presuming that with a history in this business, that it won't be terribly long, that there will be books starring certain of those characters. In fact, Captain Atom has already got a book. Isn't he one of the new 52? So I guess that answers the question right there. Yes, sir.
So what non-Watchmen books are you excited about in the new DCU since the reboot?
Wow. Still liking Batman. Always liked Batman.
Which one?
Batman. Not all the other bats, not Batwing, Batnose, Batfeet. Just Batman. And Detective, those two predominantly. I'm interested in Earth 2, just to see what he does with it. James Robinson loves that particular universe. And the whole idea of rebooting it yet again, but with these guys as the second incarnations of the characters as opposed to the first, kind of fascinates me. What else do I like? I like the challenges of the unknown that's going on currently. I'm interested in how long they can sustain doing Jonah Hex essentially in cities as opposed to out in the West. I like about a third of them. A third of them I just don't care. I don't care about Superman anymore. I was amazed to discover I couldn't care less with what's happened to him. And I always liked Superman before that. But they are this December, I don't think I'm giving anything away because I read it somewhere in some magazine, doing not year zero, but issue zero of all 52, where they will do the origins as the origins are now. So any questions you folks have about who and what and where should be answered in September. If not, don't blame me. Yes?
I guess going back to Before Watchmen, what has Dave Gibbons been saying about Before Watchmen, or has he contacted you guys at all?
No, well, we spoke to Dave. Dave has always been supportive of the material. I was with Dave at the premiere of the movie, and he, I like that. I like that. That's not that. But he's a reasonable, intelligent human being. He wishes us well. He's smart enough, knowing he still lives on the same island as Alan, to get into a fight with Alan. Although Alan, of course, now won't talk to him either, unfortunately. But he has been supportive of the project. He just doesn't feel it's proper for him necessarily, without Alan, to be involved in it. He's a gentleman. He's just one of the nicest guys. All right, we got more time. Yes?
Hello, my name is Pablo Gunner of Talk Nerdy to Me, and I know this is a Before Watchmen panel, but I was just wondering if you have any future projects that you could tell us about?
I always. Otherwise, I'm retired. I don't like that. I'm, as well as the two Watchmen projects, I'm writing a story for this year's Doctor Who annual for IDW. Just the weirdest set of circumstances. I went to the WonderCon this year, which was down in Anaheim, specifically to meet Joe Hill, because I've been friends with Joe's dad since before there was a Joe Hill. Joe's dad being Stephen King. I've known Stephen since we were both teenagers. And it was a weird set of circumstances. I sort of cut into the line where folks were having him sign autographs, and the youngster on line before me said, "Mr. Hill, I just want you to know you're the reason I started to read comic books." And I was just standing there, and Joe looked up and saw my name tag and said, "Oh my God, that's the reason I started to read comic books." And invited my wife and I to dinner with a bunch of folks from IDW. And he asked me that question. He said, "Is there any character you've never written that you've always wanted to write?" And a few weeks ago, someone else had asked me the same question. And I said, 3 weeks ago, the answer would have been no. But right after somebody else asked me that same question, I realized, of course there is. And he said, "Well, who?" I said, "Exactly." And he said, one of the other guys who was an editor at IDW looked up and said, "Well, we can make that happen." And suddenly I'm writing for the Doctor Who annual and having a great time. So that should be out, I think, this fall. I hope it's this fall. I still do television. I still do animation. I finished my 7th episode of Ben 10. I've been writing for that show for a while. And I'm going to be doing more. I finished my first and have been asked back to do more episodes of Beware the Batman, the new CG animated series that starts, I think, next fall, weirdly, if not even this fall. So, yes, I am doing other stuff besides just the Watchmen stuff. And I still do occasional Simpsons story. I have a story with Dan Brereton coming up for this year's Treehouse of Horror. It's a Cthulhu story. Yes?
You said the biggest obstacle for any future installments in the Watchmen franchise is that so many of the characters are dead.
Yes.
Comics have taught me that death isn't that real, isn't very permanent. What's stopping them from doing that?
There was actually away from the mic, I'm sorry. There was actually a quote that is attributed to me. This is because I said it. That is, in comic books, no one is ever really dead unless you can see the body, and usually not even then. So I'm a firm believer in that. But I think to resurrect the dead in this particular instance is it's just not right. The way they passed, the way he dealt with his own characters, in the end, I think ought to be the way they're left. I suppose there's the possibility of adding new characters to that universe, but I feel uncomfortable doing even that. It is a limited series with limited potential alternatives, I think, and we're working as best we can to cover the best of the alternatives now. But I could be wrong. Yes, sir.
So in a big comic book company like DC, is there some, super person who makes all artistic decisions that decides whether or not someone comes back to life or not, and like a lord of canon?
Yeah, usually there is. The publisher, needs to determine, I don't want you to kill that character. We're making money on that book, or vice versa. When we crippled Batgirl many, many years ago, we had to get Jeanette Conn's approval. Jeanette was the publisher at the time. And so major decisions like that usually have to be run past the person who will get yelled at if we start losing money because of the choice. Yes? Look, I'm going to start asking you guys questions in 2 minutes if you don't keep it. You scared them. Yes, sir.
Have you ever tried any psychedelics or anything like that?
No.
In order to get your characters or anything like that?
Never. I'm one of those extraordinarily boring people who've never done drugs of any sort, except medicinal. I mean, my doctor recommended them. But I always felt if I started to do that, if I mess with the machine, there goes my career. So I've just never, ever taken drugs. Got anything interesting?
I got a question.
Thank God.
So I picked up the first one before Watchmen, Minuteman.
Yes.
A little skeptical about the whole thing at first, but I'm convinced now it's going to work. I liked it a lot. But my question deals with your Crimson Corsair backup.
Yes.
There's only 2 pages of it?
Yep.
Is that how it's going to be in every issue, just 2 pages?
Yeah, we're going to start publishing the shortest comics in history. One piece of paper. You're going to have a sheet of paper, front pages. No, the whole idea was there was no logical way to run a story in and out through the other stories as we had done with the Tales of the Black Freighter, where it kind of echoed it. So Dan said, well, you figure out how to do this. So I said, 2 pages an issue. We'll just run it as a serial. And Dan said, fine. And I thought that was a great idea until I sat down and started to plot the book and suddenly realized I had to come up with 35 cliffhangers. Wasn't my easiest week. But eventually it will all be collected. And the last 10 pages will be in one entity in the book called Watchmen Epilogue, which will tie up a number of little things from the other books. As I said, the most fun I had was the afternoon I sat down and designed an entire line of DC Pirate comics, which there will be an ad in the epilogue book for, I hope, unless they screw it up somehow. Yes, sir.
Which of the characters do you think they're having the hardest time with?
Wow, that's an interesting question. In terms of getting pages than I am. Although what Jay has done, I can't wait for you people to see it. It's literally breathtaking. Every other artist working on the project went, well, why am I doing this? He's done that. There's no reason for me to continue. I think Ozzy's difficult. I think that's one of the reasons. Dan loves to give me projects he doesn't think anyone else can do. So there is the element of Ozzy. And the psychology of Dr. Manhattan, which Joe Straczynski is handling, is not an easy thing to adjust. A man who lives all the time at the same moment, everything he will ever experience or ever has experienced, he's experiencing now, is an interesting take. And there's a lot of quantum physics in this miniseries that works. I mean, Joe is terrific at it. Yes, sir.
When you guys had that meeting in New York and all that, was there anything you guys were told you couldn't do, or somebody came up with something and DC came out and said no, you can't? Or
Yeah, I'm thinking. Hang on. I don't think so. I think the reason we were chosen is our instincts are good. There's nothing I can recall anyway that Dan said, no, don't do that. The general response was, oh my God, you can do that. Yes?
True confession, I had never heard about Charlton Comics. And even worse, I'm a comic book virgin, except for maybe an Archie and Jughead when I was in junior high. But I watched the Watchmen movie, and that's why I came here, because I was intrigued by it. And so, I'm just totally fascinated by what you're saying, and where should I start?
Wow. Well, I mean, if you want to start with the before Watchmen stuff, the first issue is probably in the comic dealer's room back there. It's Minutemen, which precedes Watchmen. But to get the entire experience, really, you ought to pick up a copy of Watchmen. It's almost impossible not to be able to find it. So start there. Start reading the original. I think it will give you a whole lot of texture for what we're doing that precedes it. I mean, there's some wonderful bits of business, wonderful artwork. It's just as good as the original in its own way, he says egocentrically. Of course, the next crowd I'm at, they may be throwing fruit at me, so what do I know? Yes, sir.
Follow up on that. I work at a public library, and I have urged the Watchmen graphic novel collection on many people as their first graphic novel experience. And people who were reluctant came back to me and said, thank you. I didn't know the storytelling could be like this. I just thought it was a comic book. So it is a great place to start, and it's worked a lot of people in other places. Another good place to start in graphic novel form is Fun Home, which is a phenomenal work. It's won all sorts of awards. But Watchmen was the one that really legitimized graphic novels.
Yes.
And it was the first, like I said, people handed it back to me and said, I did this because I trusted you, but this was a hell of a read.
It's amazing how much people are thinking their way through things. I had, in this last week, as we were going through panic, is Jay going to finish the first issue on time? He sent in a set of rough layouts for me to dialogue from, and I did so. And then the pencils came in, and he changed many of those things radically. And I called him up, and I said, you can't do this. The book has to ship next week. I wrote off of what you drew. And he said, yeah, but I didn't draw the right things. I thought a lot about what he is, who he is, what he would do, why he would do it. And so I changed the body language in these panels to match that. If you match it against the dialogue you wrote, you'll discover it still works. But it tells a different story. And I was furious. And then the pages came in, and I went, oh, shit, he's right. And I actually wrote back and apologized. I said, I've been doing this a long time. I don't often do this, but you're right and I'm wrong. So there is this kind of evolution going on constantly. And it's not just a job of work for any of the people in this project. It's something they are thinking about. Everything before they put a line down, before they put a picture down or a word, they're thinking, is this the right thing for this person at this time? And I don't often see that kind of effort, that determination to do the best I possibly can, not in competition with, but honestly in awe of all of the people I'm working with. It's a great time. Because I actually felt relieved. I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I was so upset. My wife is going, relax, it's a comic book. I'm going, no, it's not. And then stuff came in, and I went, oh, we're fine. This is going to be good. Yeah, and 3 weeks from now, you'll tell me if I was right.
Question
Yes, sir.
You've talked about being a writer and an editor. What is your favorite role to play in the creation of a comic book?
Robin Hood. No, that's not. No. Actually, editor. I prefer being an editor to a writer because I get to mold the entire package. I get to work with the artists. I get to work with the letterers, the colorists, the writers. I feel I can get my finger into all the pies as opposed to just, the blueberry. And I prefer that. I love to write. I mean, I've been doing that for a long time. But there's something about the completeness of being an editor on a book where you can make it from the beginning to the end, where you can steer people in directions that make them better. All of the stuff that fills out the Watchmen, the original book, all of the chapters of Under the Hood and the articles and the pieces that fill out the back of the book were all something I suggested to the writer at the time, because I said, this is the first or the second of the mini-series. The first had been Camelot 3000. And I realized we did letter columns in the books those days. And I said, it's kind of unfair. No one's ever going to be able to really write in letters and discuss their views the last 4 issues, because by the time the letters come in, the book will be done. I said we should find something else to fill these pages. We should come at it and see what we can do to amplify the story we're telling. Little places where you don't have a chance, where things are mentioned. Let's show those things. Let's talk about it. Let's do articles or chapters and all of what Alan did along the way. And that's one of the things I'm proudest of in that project. Yes?
Who's the favorite character that you've created?
Wow. Brother Voodoo. No, it's not true. Actually, I like Brother Voodoo, but toss up between Wolverine and Swamp Thing, probably. I mean, it seems like the obvious ones, but they are. I mean, my favorite story, though, my favorite characters aren't necessarily those. My favorite book I've ever written, just in terms of, oh boy, was the Batman-Hulk crossover I did many years ago with Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. My 2 favorite characters in one can. It was very exciting. More questions? Oh, come on, make something up. God bless you.
You said that you felt that Before Watchmen is going to be as good as the original. Are you hoping for it to be better? Do you think it can be better?
Good question. I think in its way it can. I don't think anyone will perceive it as such. Way back 20, 30 years ago, I was offered the chance to go back to one of my old titles, The Swamp Thing, I think in particular, and I turned it down at the time. I said, the problem is, no matter how good a job I do, I have to this is going to be compared to the way people remember the original work. Not what I necessarily did, but how they remember it. And I think there's that particular problem here as well. No matter how good a job we do, there are going to be those who go, but it's not the original. There's that panel on the original where, there's this scene here where. And so you just do the best you can and hope for the best. But I think not one of us will have anything to be ashamed of when we're done. And that's as good as you can get, I think. Yes, sir.
You were saying that some people were scared to tell Alan Moore what to do. Is there anybody that you're scared of?
Me? Yeah. Julie Schwartz, God rest him, used to scare the hell out of her. I worked for Julie in an affectionate way. I mean, I loved him dearly. He was a dear, dear friend. But he had a capacity for scaring the audience. He used to walk down the office halls every day in his days, sort of with his hand in his pocket, jingling his change. And it was like belling the cat. Everyone knew, Julie's coming, and they all run in their offices and hide. Although he was the sweetest, dearest man. I mean, we became very, very dear friends. The day we became friends, I will tell a stupid story. I was a kid. I was in my early 20s. And I had just started working for Julie, literally by him dragging me by the scruff of my neck out of Nelson Bridwell's guest chair and putting me in his own. I was there that day in my early days at DC to try to sell Nelson some Lois Lane stories. He was editing that book. And Julie shared an office with him. And Julie came in and said, "You, what the hell are you doing there?" And they knew me from my fanzines, and I used to take the DC tour, so they knew who I was. And I said, I'm just waiting to sell Mr. Brittle a Lois Lane story, I hope. And he grabbed me by the scruff of my neck, I've never forgotten this, lifted me out of Nelson's chair, dragged me across the room, sat me on his guest chair, and he said, "No, you're not, you're writing The Flash." I went, "What?" And he said, "You couldn't possibly do a worse job than the son of a bitch I just fired. You're writing The Flash." Okay. Yes, sir. So I wrote a few Flash stories, but it led to me having a long and loving career with him. And early after that point, when we were friendly to some degree, I was in the office one day and just thinking about a story, so I wander aimlessly. And I wandered to Julie's office, and he's very carefully hunched over his script. He's proofreading in pencil. And he looks at me and says, "You, what the hell are you doing here now?" I said, "Oh, nothing. I just thought I'd stand around and watch you grow senile." And he looked at me, and he started to, and then all of a sudden he started to laugh. And he laughed so hard he fell out of his chair. And that's when we became friends. Oh, apparently today's panel is being sponsored by the number 5. So all friends of... Yes. No, you... All right. God, you're polite. There are polite people in Albuquerque. Yes, sir.
Who is your favorite artist to work with?
It has to be Bernie. I mean, I love working with Walter Simonson, John Buscema. But Bernie and I shared a brain, which explains a lot about Bernie. It's half of the brain anyway. We finished each other's sentences when we did Swamp Thing. It was one of the great experiences of my career. We just were on exactly the same wavelength and the same page. But I've been blessed. I got to work with Garcia Lopez a lot. I got the Kuberts and God, just so many terrific artists. It's really not fair. I got a shot. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably have to pick Bernie. Yes.
So my question is, when I first got introduced to Watchmen actually in high school, because I had a teacher who read Watchmen in the 80s when he was in college and fell in love with it so much that he felt the need to teach his students Watchmen.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, no, he's a personal hero of mine. And as a result, I love the stories. But have you found there's a big difference between people who read it in the fans who have read it in the 80s when it first came out, and people, I would say my age, who are like 25?
I don't think I've ever had a deep enough conversation with any of the people who've read the book to be able to determine differences in their approaches. So far, almost everybody likes it. And then they meet Alan, and that's not true. No, generally the overwhelming response. I mean, that's how a book stays in print for 30 years. Alan's argument, well, you guys promised it to me back if it went out of print. It keeps selling. It sold 1 million copies the year the movie came out. That's why. It's not what we're cheating you, Alan. Although he's firmly convinced there's something behind it. But then this is a man who wears keyboard ties. So, the weird thing about Alan, not to talk out of school, but I'm in Albuquerque, what's he going to do? Well, somebody asked me what he's doing these days, and I said, he's trying to become a magician. Seriously, he's really working to become a magician. I said, not David Copperfield, Stephen Strange. He really wants to be a sorcerer. And you nod and you back quietly away and leave Alan to whatever he's going to do next. Anyway, we have now 4 minutes. Do you know where your future is? Anything else? You can ask me the question that doesn't involve the Watchmen, and I'll make up an answer. Yes?
One last question.
Sure.
Are you going to be here tomorrow? Or are you...
Yes.
Okay.
Think I'd schlep all this way for an afternoon? I actually have a bunch of dear friends who live in the area, George R.R. Martin and Melinda Snodgrass and a lot of the writing group who all live in this area. So I'm hoping to have dinner with them and other things before I leave town.
I'd love to get your autograph.
Oh, of course. Okay. I'll be here all the rest of the day because they took my car. I don't know. Anyway, I guess, wow, it's 5. It seems we're done. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.